Hello and welcome back to another video on Sri Lanka. Now I'm so excited to be back here because I've got another video today on tips and tricks for visiting a myriad of places actually, but they all centre around the Knuckles region, Riverston, and one of the most iconic places in Sri Lanka, Mini World's End. So I was in Sri Lanka at the beginning of this year in February. I headed there with my friend Sandy for 10 days exploring this incredible country. It was the first time heading to Sri Lanka and I'm so glad that I got a trip in before COVID hit earlier this year. I loved Sri Lanka from the moment we set foot in Colombo, to the hills of the tea plantations, to seeing elephants in the wild. This country just has everything you could possibly imagine you could want on a holiday. I spent 10 days exploring Sri Lanka. We flew into Colombo. I spent a day in Colombo before heading into the middle of the island of Sri Lanka to go on an elephant safari at Manera National Park, and I've got a vlog on that if you want to see that one as well, so check that out. We then headed to Pidarangula Rock for a sunrise hike for views of Sigiriya, before heading south and spending a couple of days in Kandy, before heading on to Norelia to visit the tea plantations, and then heading even further south down to the south coast of Sri Lanka to Galle. It's here we spent a couple of days by the beach before heading back up to Colombo to fly home back to London on an 11-hour flight. We very much had planned our itinerary for Sri Lanka down to the T, like every morning and afternoon was planned. But we had one spare day and we weren't sure how to spend that day because it was in the middle of the trip. It was just after we had left Pidarangula Rock on a sunrise hike, and after that we were heading to Kandy and then on to Norelia and then Ella, and then we had a couple of days around about in that block right in the middle we didn't really know what to do with, but after a bit of research and a couple of recommendations from friends who had travelled there before, we opted for the option to go on a hike around some of the hillside villages, visit some local families, go to a couple of waterfalls and head to Mini World's End. So we were picked up from our hotel in Matal, which is one of the closest towns to this area. You can go from Kandy, but of course the drive is then a little bit longer to and from the destination, and you're looking at like a 6 AM wake-up call. So we headed from our hotel in Matal into the Knuckles region, and it took about an hour to an hour and a half to get up the mountainside. And when I say up the mountainside, these roads were literally hairpin bends all the way up for about an hour. So if you are a bit what's the word, queasy, is that a word? I don't know, but if you feel a bit sick in the car, this probably isn't a great trip for you, but it was worth it. The hairpin bends, it was worth it. I do get a bit car sick, so I did feel a little bit sick on the way up and on the way down, but because it was an early start I managed to sleep quite a lot of that hour, and didn't feel too sick once we got to the top. As part of our day in the Knuckles region, we decided to take a pit stop at one of Sri Lanka's most iconic viewpoints, which is Mini World's End. Mini World's End is just a cliff face, but there is a slight hike as well. So you pull up in your car, you park your car, and then you head off for about a 20-minute hike. You head off through some of the fields and you'll see some cows and some wildlife, up to a viewpoint cliff where the valley then opens up and it just offers you some of the most insane views I've ever seen. Mini World's End is basically a drop-off point into the Gamua Valley, I think that's how you pronounce it, and it's around 4,000 feet drop, so it's high and it does offer some incredible views. So it's definitely a place to go if you want to get some incredible photos of the nature and wildlife and scenery of Sri Lanka. The hike is around 5 kilometers, and at this point you're not too high up, so the altitude isn't too bad, but we did find the altitude got a little bit worse as we then ventured on higher into the Knuckles region. After we'd finished in Mini World's End, we then headed off back in the car and we headed up to Riverston, which is a local village area where a lot of the tea pickers in this area and rice plantations are. So we parked up the car and headed off on around a 10-kilometre hike, and we stopped for lunch midway through. And this was exactly the type of experience that we were both craving during this trip. We'd just spent a few days doing a lot of the tourist hotspots, so we were really after a more local experience that we could both feel like we'd integrated ourselves into Sri Lankan life a little bit more. Our forest trek took us up and down some incredibly steep hills, across rivers, valleys, through tea plantations, and then we ended up around 1 o'clock at a local village where we had lunch, and the wonderful family who had some adorable children gave us the most incredible traditional Sri Lankan lunch, and it was just so good. They ate with us, which was incredible, and Sandy also loved eating all of the food with her hands, which I was not brave enough to do, but she loved it, and she was scooping up all the food and the rice and the curry and the vegetables with her hands. Then, once we'd finished lunch, we started our hike back to the van, and it took us about 2 hours to get back, and we went back through some of the incredibly steep hills, rice paddies, and we met a few more people along the way, and then we finally got back to our driver, who was in the car back where we'd started. And after this, we jumped back in the car again, like I say, and we headed off for our final stop of the day. Now it was around 2-3 o'clock at this point, so we knew we only had a couple of hours to catch one more thing before we needed to start heading back to Kandy. Our final stop of the day was at some of the Sri Lanka's most incredible waterfalls, and we chucked on our swimming costumes and headed for a swim. It was nice to cool down after a really sweaty day. It was around 30 degrees all day, so after a 10-kilometre hike, 5-kilometre hike, we were pretty ready for a dip in the waterfall, and it was just a really nice way to end the day. There was a lot of locals here as well, so I think it was a pretty undiscovered tourist destination, which was really nice because there was lots of families and groups of teenage lads just chilling by the water and enjoying the views. A tour in the Knuckles is just one of the most magical experiences I think you can have while in Sri Lanka. You get to really see the ecosystems of this incredible country, and it's just such a great experience to feel like you are getting to see a more local side of Sri Lanka. So this is my vlog, and I really hope you love this tips and tricks for hiking in the Knuckles region and visiting Mini World's End. If you've got any other questions, feel free to drop me a message on Instagram, and I've also got a blog post on this as well, so if you have any more questions, I might have already answered them in the blog post, and I'll link that down below as well. Thank you for tuning in. If you loved this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well for more videos in the coming weeks. Thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye.